Welcome everyone to another Red Lines TV. My name is Mike Cowley. I'm delighted this morning to welcome Paul Larkin, author of Anyone But Celtic, Connolly Rising, many other titles, and a fellow podcaster from Still the Tims podcast, which I fully recommend. We're going to be talking this morning, and I'm really looking forward to a chat about circumstances that have developed at Celtic Football Club following the prolonged demonstrations of solidarity amongst the Green Brigade, the Celtic Ultras, for the Palestinian struggle, and the fact that they have now had their season tickets confiscated, or depending where you have picked up your news, suspended. And this has caused, as you would imagine, an awful lot of tension at the club. That has been compounded by the comments from Nir Beaton, an ex-player and a much-loved player and a loyal player over the years at Celtic Football Club, no longer with the club, who has been very critical on social media of the Celtic fans, at least that element of them who have been vocal in their support for the Palestinians. And also Niall Abada, a very exciting player, currently long-term injured, but it has been reported that he feels, as an Israeli player, conflicted about his place within the club. Nothing more. It's speculation about how Abada feels, but we wish him well, and of course understand any Israeli player who looks back to their family and his concerns. So naturally, in these circumstances, as we have come to expect, the Celtic fans, the Celtic Ultras, the Green Brigade in particular, have been accused of anti-Semitism by no one less than Alon Hazan, the Israeli head coach, the manager of the national team. So I'm looking forward to talking with Paul about these events, what he makes of them. And he is an acquaintance. Some of you may have watched. If you haven't, I fully recommend it. Our interview of some months ago with Paul McPherson, also a Celtic fan, and his eloquent description of the power of the crowd, the solidarity of the terraces, and his belief that the Green Brigade and those sections of the Celtic fan who are class conscious, who are politically conscious, are the ones who are actually holding up the best traditions of a club founded by immigrants for immigrants, as opposed to the machinations of the board and the club's hierarchy. So this is my conversation with Paul Larkin. Paul, welcome to Red Lines TV. It's great to see you, mate. And we're fellow podcasters, and I know you've been talking a lot in all kinds of platforms about recent events at Celtic. Just for the viewers at home, we've had Paul McPherson on the show before, speaking about his experiences as a supporter and his commitment, as he sees it, to the best traditions of the club. But since he was on, obviously events in Gaza have been on the front page, but on the front page and the back page has been this story about the Green Brigade, Celtic Ultras, having their season tickets confiscated, suspended by the club hierarchy. Can you just describe the events leading up to that and maybe where that kind of standoff sits now?
I think, there had been previous incidents where there had been Palestinian flags on show, and Celtic were basically fined by UEFA. And what the Green Brigade did with that was match the fine and put it to causes for the Palestinian people. But what we're talking about here is two kind of sets of people diametrically opposed to each other, standing in the same room, but, And it's clear that the ideals of the current Celtic board didn't time with the ideals of the Green Brigade. And so there seems to have been this narrative developed by the board, which is that it's not about flags, it's about behaviour, and it's about different aspects of hooliganism, basically, and all that. And it's kind of then got to the point where they specifically asked fans not to take Palestinian flags to the Atletico Madrid game. And not only did the Green Brigade do that, but a lot of other fans did as well. And then, of course, this then led to suspension of the away tickets for the Green Brigade, and then subsequently the suspension of their season tickets. And so the problem with that is that for people like me, it does go against the ideals of the football club that we were kind of all brought up with. So in that sense, the board are very good at kind of doing the kind of who me type thing. And but in reality is that, you know, they could have just literally said nothing about the Palestinian flags and nothing probably major would have happened. But the fact that they actually went to that length, they actually said, don't bring them, you know, that's like a red rag to a bull for people who are of civil disobedience, of protest, of common empathy with people that they feel oppressed and all that kind of stuff. You know, and it really gets to the point where you think, so what is actually going on here? Yeah. You know, because most Celtic fans will tell you that, you know, if you look at our supporter base, it goes right around the world, primarily because of the diaspora, Irish people having to move and stuff like that. And if you ask people around the world what they identify with Celtic, it's that. Yeah. It's, you know, the formation of the club, it's the ideals of the club, and it's also what they stand for. You know, I can remember, showing my age, going to a game in 1982 against Real Sociedad, and Celtic flew the Basque flag for them, which above the jungle, I should say, and they were absolutely over the moon with us, because they had constantly said to other teams, we didn't want the Spanish flag to be our representative, you know. Similarly, at that time, you'll probably remember yourself and people watching, you know, we flew all the Argentinian flags at Celtic when the Falklands and Malvinas was going on, like, you know. So there's always been that kind of common cause. And we've also had instances in our history where 4 or 5 times the SAFA have asked us to remove the Irish tricolour from Celtic Park. And Robert Kelly himself said, you know, we'll play Gaelic football here before we abandon that flag, because he knew, he was of the era that he knew how important it was in kind of the formation of the club, in terms of the identity of the club, and also how, you know, Irish language and poetry and all that kind of stuff had been suppressed. Yeah. And so it was important for our identity. We moved that into the kind of common ground we have now in terms of the current situation. You see identity being pushed a lot, you know, in politics and all that kind of stuff. But I think what the Green Brigade are saying, and certainly what I'm saying, is A, I love our identity. B, I'm very, very proud of it. And C, we want to absolutely defend it.
Yeah. But what's interesting, Paul, and we've seen this on the terraces, in addition to tricolours, Palestinian flag and so on, is that class identity. There's been absolutely stuff as well. It's not simply about national identity or the expression of an immigrant identity. It's about class solidarity as well, isn't it?
100%. I mean, Mike, people like me and you didn't live in the world that the Celtic board live in. Yeah. Nor did the Green Brigade. They didn't live in the world, you know, chauffeur-driven limousines and heated driveways and all that kind of stuff. And but it seems to be that our board in particular do have this kind of built-in image of ultras in the Green Brigade, and they'll never change for it. And what I would say to that is, you know, you can't have it both ways. You can't have fantastic stadium tifos and great songbooks and banners and all that, but then say, but you can't do this and you can't do that. That's not how it works. You know, it's like people, you know, the old saying, you can't invite folk to a revolution. It just happens. And also, because of that, you know, we have like a situation with Peter Lawwell, who is on the ECA, the European board of whatever, you know, one of these faceless organisations that we get to help does a lot of great work for us. I've never seen any evidence of this. And it's almost like he's sort of ashamed of the Green Brigade on our behalf towards UEFA, even though, whilst you all get supporters who will be opposed to certain things they do and all that, they didn't feel represented by that. And, football was always a working class game. It kind of still remains that in Scotland, while other leagues are kind of corporate and flashing the money and Saudi Arabia and all that kind of stuff, and of course doing in England. But it seems as though they want to make it like a sterilised league. Yeah. And, that's no, it used to always drive me crazy when, before Rangers were liquidated, there was never any promotion of that game. It was like, we'll keep it at the worst times, 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning and all that kind of stuff. You look down south and Man United Liverpool, it's like, two tribes are going to war, this is going to be the best thing ever and all that kind of thing. And it kind of lends into that sort of the class expression of the board basically telling support, we know better than you do.
Yeah. It strikes me, just as you're speaking there, Paul, I stay in Leith, an area of Edinburgh I know you know well, and it's becoming heavily gentrified now, parts Absolutely. Of Leith anyway. And it's almost I see almost the equivalent relationship between the middle and upper middle class people coming into the area who want a wee taste of the danger, the edge of Leith, but and they want to appropriate aspects of that to their own lives, but they want to keep a distance. They don't want to get too close to it. And it's almost like the Celtic board, as you say, they'll take the traditions and they'll take the energy and the vitality that the fans bring to the club, but they don't want to get too close to them. They want to keep them at a distance. And I wonder, Paul, is there a time that you, and I know you're a historian of the club, and is there a time that this disconnect between the fans and those who run the club happened, or has there always been this distance, or was there a period you can see where this breach actually began to happen?
I think, funnily enough, it was probably when the old board were ousted. And the old board were ousted for a number of reasons, but if you ask anybody, it was because we were getting beat most weeks at football, right? That's what matters to football fans in general, is winning, right? So they go, and Fergus McCann comes in, and fair enough, and does a great job and builds a stadium and that. But in that sort of ether became this corporate sort of mentality arising, and very soon he launched Boys Against Bigotry. Now, I can remember at the time, people were saying, hold on a minute here, myself included, we're going round the country getting told that the opposing fans are up to their knees in our blood, and you're telling us to stop, And so from that then on, there was this kind of sort of chasm that started to become, and when the team's winning and doing really well, people didn't focus on it that much. Me and you will, and people in the Green Brigade will, but in reality, they're just like, nah, we're doing well in the park and all that kind of thing. But as it's went on, I've found it more and more questioning of people in charge at Celtic. There was an initiative that they tried and didn't go into about songs recently, maybe not just pretty post-pandemic time. And it was just basically like saying, look, we've got to get rid of these songs and whatever, and blah, 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 and the add-ons that mentioned this, that, and the next thing. And they probably had quite a lot of nodding heads among the support with that, But what I said to them was, I said, look, we're now, because of the release files in Ireland 30, 40 years ago, we now know that there was torture going on, there was waterboarding, there was men getting thrown out of helicopters, and there was people indiscriminately being shot, and you want to castigate me for singing a song?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't really fly with that. And that does tie into the formation of the club. There was definitely, in the Fergus McCann era, an airbrush in the Celtic's formation. And that's led on to today, where it's like, it's all about charity, and it's all about this, and it's all about that. Okay. And it's fine if people want to raise money for charity and help people. There's nothing wrong with that, of course. But Celtic were also very much a vehicle for Irish Home Rule.
Yeah.
People like John Glass and Pat Welsh and Michael Davitt, who incidentally named the club Celtic, they saw it as, Brother Walfred had the idea of, right, let's, we need to feed the poor immigrant Irish in the East End of Glasgow, fine. But it was Glass and Welsh and Davitt that had the brains and the organisational skills to actually make it happen. You know, they were the ones that signed the players, paid the players, built the stadium, etc., etc., etc. Because as much as Brother Wolf had been a priest, wanted to feed people, of course, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, they thought, well, why should we just be fed? Why can't we have our own identity? We have a beautiful culture here, a poetry, and it's very similar to, you know, when Patrick Pearse looked at what was happening in Ireland and the oppression of Cromwell and all that. How do we retain this? How do we get the Irish language and poetry and culture and writers back in the ether? He started a school, 1902. And right there were the seeds of the Irish Rebellion in 1916. And with Celtic, you know, because there hadn't been what you would say physical force rebellion in Ireland since probably 1798, they were really unchallenged in terms of that identity and all that. And it only actually changed when the Irish Rebellion happened and the club and Govan said, oh, influenced by people that were working there through Harland and Wolff, we need to watch these people. And that in itself laid the seeds of their sectarian signing policy and their apartheid against Catholics. So there was tons of that. Willie Maley spoke at, who was manager for 50 odd years, he spoke at Irish Home Rule meetings and marches and things like that. So there was a wealth of Irish culture and history and basically, you know, identity. So anybody, as they say in the song, who knows their history is going to feel akin to people from Palestine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's absolutely natural, isn't it? This is what's frustrating, Paul, to me. It's such a natural expression, an organic expression of solidarity. It would actually be strange if it wasn't there in many ways. So do you think, Paul, are the actions of the Celtic board, is it a mix of the politics of it that they resent or fear, but also a desire to polish what to them is a corporate brand and maintain a certain kind of image on the global scale? As you say, Celtic Football Club is an extremely, for those guys, is an extremely lucrative brand.
Yeah, it's the brand is something they mention quite a lot. Yeah. I actually, to drop a name, when I lived in New York, I actually met the guy who was like John Henry's guy, the owner of Liverpool, when they were just buying Liverpool. Yeah. And he said to me then, he said, I tell you something, he says, we all come from Boston. He said, John Henry would love to have Celtic's fan base. Yeah. And I knew why, because it was easy to sell in America, exploit it, etc., etc. But you're right, that's exactly it. And they want a brand of identity that, as you say, is polished, it's sterile and all that. But it's also completely, you know, opposed to what most fans feel about the club. Yeah. And the fans are the club. It's not the board, it's not the players, it's nothing, it's not the stadium, it's the fans. You know, that ground that Celtic are in, okay, it was rebuilt and that, but the fans built that ground. Yeah. You know, that's where the saying from graveyard to paradise came, you know, because volunteers had a common cause. And bear in mind is that one of the things that Celtic were always getting thrown at them was this kind of, you know, this scourge of the immigrants coming and all that. But whether we like it or no, when Celtic were formed, Ireland was a part of Britain. They were not immigrants. They were just seeking work and food in another part of the country, you know. And very much like the Industrial Revolution, where, you know, people start getting together and saying, you know, why are we all getting treated like this? Mm-hmm. And they'd all got all the money, and then you get, you know, the liberal reforms and eventually obviously the formation of the Labour Party and that. It was very much the same at Celtic, where you had this coming together of people, which stands to this day. Sometimes I've mentioned or heard from Celtic supporters, Mike, that, you know, that's the one place they really feel at home is Celtic Park.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, there's nothing wrong with that at all. So there's always been a kinship with oppressed people. And what we've seen, you know, especially in this age, I think is really important, Mike, because 30 years ago, we would have just been fed a narrative, and it would have been very difficult to challenge that narrative with the new Western media and that. But we have so many media outlets now that we can actually see that what's going on. Yeah. And so when you hear people saying, oh, Israel has a right to defend itself, you think, how does that equate with slaughtering 15,000 people?
Yeah, yeah. Well, let me take you on to that, Paul, because predictably, the Celtic fans, I say predictably because it's a means of delegitimizing, discrediting voices to attach the slur of anti-Semitism on them, the allegation of anti-Semitism. And the most recent allegation has come from Alon Hazan, the Israeli national coach.
Yeah.
Can you describe for the viewers that there's Nir Bitton, an ex-Celtic player, a loyal servant to the club for many, many years. Abada, one of our most exciting prospects. He's long-term injured at the moment. They, as Israeli players, have, in their different ways, Bitton has been very vocal in his criticism. Abada, we're only hearing kind of through the media what he might be feeling about the circumstances at Celtic Park. Can you describe for the viewers what's been going on there?
Yeah, so as you said, the Israeli national coach basically claimed that the Celtic fans were being anti-Semitic towards Neil Abada. I can honestly say, hand on heart, kids' lives, whatever, I've never heard an anti-Semitic comment in my life at Celtic Park. Me personally, when I lived in New York, I lived in a Jewish area called Forest Hills and was living beside streets that were called things like Yitzhak Rabin Avenue and all that, and that sort of awoke me to that kind of thing. I've visited concentration camps in Europe, Holocaust memorials and all that kind of thing. So the words anti-Semitic didn't even enter my ether in terms of, I hate these people for this, that, whatever. Certainly, there've been these players, there's been other players like Kyle and that who are Israel. I could guarantee you could ask them, have you actually been racially abused in this way? And they would say, no, absolutely not. I don't know if you know, Brendan Rodgers actually took Neil Abada out for a meal just when this started, just to make sure that he was all right, just to show a wee bit kind of common kinship and humanity. And it's an easy label. I know that anti-Semitism is very much a weaponized thing these days, and it's very much in the news. I read David Baddiel's book, and that did open my eyes a bit, Mike, I have to say.
Yeah.
When he talked about things like the portrayal of Fagin and Oliver Twist, I thought, oh, right, actually, you're right. Aye. So there's, these issues are there, obviously, but I have to say that to just kind of generalise, and I always think the minute you start generalising about a whole section of people, you're in trouble. It just doesn't really happen, and I would be personally offended by anyone to call me that, because I would like to think that, I've got a brain and I've also got a kind of common sense of humanity, which really in these situations, Mike, when you look at the big picture, that's what seems to be missing quite a lot, is this just humanity of helping people. But again, we see the identity politics and that come again with Piers Morgan's trying to get Jeremy Corbyn to call Hamas a terrorist and Owen Jones, and you think, what difference does it make what they think of them? Just let's have a debate about it. Yeah. And I also think, Mike, it really comes to the same thing in terms of the board, the Green Brigade, right up to Israel and Palestine. It's about dialogue.
Yeah, and that's what allegations anti-Semitism seeks to close down, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
You don't talk with racists. You platform them, you remove them from the conversation. And I just wonder, Paul, one of my comrades on the show, Jackie Walker, has been very publicly associated with these kind of allegations. You mentioned Corbyn and many others on the left, particularly at the moment, as you say, as Israeli bombs rain down on Gaza and the incursions proceed apace. We know that all kinds of hospitals now are being entered on the pretext that they are hideouts for Hamas. And I just wonder, and it's maybe amongst the last questions, Paul, do these allegations, do they ever, as much as you know they're false and as much as you know they're coming from a place of bad faith, do they ever sting? Do they ever hurt? To be, as you say, you're someone who's provided a platform for minority voices. You've campaigned. You're very vocal, and it must hurt. And I remember reading Yanis Varoufakis saying, "Look, this is the thing that the right have got hold of. because we've got no choice but to respond. You know, it hurts, it goes deep, and they know we can't just brush this away. We've actually got to respond, which then drags us into this debate. So does it ever wound you at all?
Yeah, it does. I remember probably just after Jeremy Corbyn became leader of the Labour Party, Linda Sale, Alexi's wife, saying online, when it was first heard that he was anti-Semitic, she said, "This is the weapon they're going to use against him."
Yeah.
And my opinion then, Mike, was that is ridiculous. This guy's campaigned against racism his whole life. He's always there on the march. There you go. And she was right. You know, look what happened to him. And so, as much as that can sound so ridiculous that you could be accused of being this, that, or whatever, some people will listen because it suits their agenda, you know? And so it is very hurtful, because I think if you're a proper socialist and you're properly on the left, you feel empathy with everybody.
Yeah.
You know? And even with your worst right-wing enemies, I think most rounded human beings who happen to be socialist, left-wing, whatever, would sit and talk and debate to them.
Yeah.
And try and educate them. Yeah. You know, I think if you look at the independence referendum in 2014, I would say to people, you know, whether you want independence or no, the way not to get it is to go, "You're an idiot for voting no."
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
exactly.
We have to talk to each other, and we have to, more importantly, listen to each other.
Yeah.
And then we can peel away all these labels and actually find out that we're just human beings like everybody else, you know?
That's right. And I think, I mean, you've nailed it there, Paul. The allegations of anti-Semitism are really a means of closing down debate, aren't they?
Yeah.
And of almost removing certain opinions from the conversation. Yeah. You know, 'cause these people are not legitimate actors. It's about discrediting this. Yeah. To finish off, Paul, how do you see these events at Celtic Park playing out? Do you think there's a resolution, or do you think this is now going to be a permanent area of tension between sections of the fans and the board?
The one glimmer of hope is the Celtic supporters liaison officer, John Paul Taylor, who is one of us on the ground, in about the Green Brigade all the time and all that kind of thing. And he will absolutely be saying to the board now, "You need to talk. We need to get in a room. We need to sit face to face, and we need to talk." Because see, the thing is, I mean, it sometimes sounds like when people talk about the Green Brigade, it's like they've been on a mass murder campaign.
Yeah.
In terms of all the labels they get. And I'm very, very uncomfortable with labelling young people with criminal records and banning here, banning there, and all that kind of thing, because this can be a long life for people.
Absolutely.
And you'll know better than anybody that if you get these stigmas attached to you young in life, it's very, very difficult to then release them from you. So you would hope, in the spirit that, you know, this club love to tell us that we're a Celtic family, you know, so, well, let's start acting like family. And I know family can be each other's throats like anybody else, but, you know, we're all Celtic supporters. Yeah. You know, when I was growing up, that got you away with a lot, you know, in terms of he's one of us, we'll look after him. He might have been badly behaved today, but sort it out and all that kind of thing. Mere dialogue, mere common sense, and less, I think, the statement tennis and all that kind of thing has to just go, and let's just get them in a room and talk to each other. Because I'll tell you right now, Mike, the Green Brigade members I know and I've spoken to are very lucid, intelligent people. They're no thugs.
Absolutely.
You know, and people will disagree with some of the things they do, obviously. I didn't like pyro myself, to be honest, but there you go. But at the end of the day, if they want a resolution, it's there on the table, and it just needs the two that we sit either side of that.
Yeah, out with all the noise. And as Jock probably our greatest manager, maybe the greatest manager Scotland's ever produced, said, you'll know very well, football is nothing without fans, and you cannot marginalise these people. I don't go at Parkhead as often as I'd like, Paul, but when I'm there, the Green Brigade are the most energised, most vital part of the ground that maintain that kind of that kinetic energy about the place.
Yeah, and also, I mean, you know, Celtic were one of the few clubs who had organised supporters clubs very early on in their history, the great clubs and all that. And they would have various patrons, you know, and a good player or that. And one of the first patrons was actually Kevin Barry.
Yeah.
So that's in 1920, young man executed by the British and all that kind of thing. So there was a common cause there all the time. The supporters are the club, Often I've heard Peter Lowell say, we're a broad church, and I think, are we really? I want Celtic to win, I want them to play really good football, and I want us to have the ideals that were handed down to us by our forefathers. I think most people are like that at Celtic.
Yeah.
So, there's no point in changing that identity. So it's a wonderful cultural identity Celtic has. It's a great, if you look at something like Rocky, you've got Sylvester Stallone documentary on Netflix now. Why do people love that? Because it was the story of the underdog. But it was made up. We are the underdog, and it's real, and it's a fairy tale. So we should be promoting that as one rather than fighting each other.
Yeah, and I guess that's the difference between those authentic traditions, Paul, and the corporate brand that you discussed. They're not really compatible, are they? You've got to go for one or the other. Paul, it's been a real pleasure. Thanks so much for your time, and good luck. The podcast, Still the Tim, recommended to Red Line TV viewers, and good luck with the books as well, Paul.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, Mike. Thank you very much, Paul.
Solidarity, mate.
Cheers.